on a mission.
Dallas, I'm so excited to be here.
It's like a reunion, even though it hasn't been that long, but I got to be a guest on your show not long ago, and we had it was our first time meeting, and it was a really fun conversation. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you now returning the favor and coming on this show.
I love it. Can we just trade podcasts back and forth
Right?
and until the end of time? Like that's my jam.
This sounds pretty efficient, actually. I love it. So I invited you here because you are, in my mind, the leading authority on all things quizzes and funnels. And we've been talking a lot inside of the Hive, but also on this show about the importance of list building and the value of lead magnets. So I'm excited to soak up all of your expertise today. Before we dive specifically into a conversation about quizzes, can you just draw a distinction for us today and talk about the difference between a monoculture marketing approach and creating a diverse and thriving ecosystem in your marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can even enter that conversation from the quiz lens
Cool.
because I've been in the online business world for about 7 years now, and probably five of those quizzes, assessments, quiz funnels has been my main focus. When I first started doing that work, I thought, "Oh, this is such a great niche. It's all about lead gen and conversions and I've got such great case studies and yada yada yada, right?" And it was just
Mhm.
this very hypey thing, and I definitely entered it with that perspective of, I can sell this solution to people's problems, and I wasn't thinking about all of the other aspects of my own business, of the business of my client, my students eventually, that also factored into their long term success and ability to create a business that is sustainable and that feels good to them and that feels aligned with what they actually want and their values. And I know you talk about that so much, and I really appreciate it because our values are so unique to us. And so our businesses and our marketing needs to be unique to us as well. And, I would create things for people that would do incredibly well. They'd get thousands of new leads and have awesome conversions, but that didn't necessarily, like, that wasn't the end all be all. And suddenly everything is magical and perfect in their business. Like, there's
Right.
so much that factors in. And I've really now come to this work from a perspective of it's all connected, and I have that perspective in my life as well, and I
Mhm.
see that in nature. And so pulling those lessons from life, from nature, from how natural ecosystems function, bringing them into the world of business and marketing, to me made so much sense because we see so much destruction in our external environment thanks to, largely like this mentality that we can just raise the rainforests
Right.
and plant a whole bunch of soy and feed the world, or, like replace rainforests with cows, and like this monoculture mentality. It affects us in our internal world as well. It affects us in our businesses. We see it in the marketing methodologies that are so popular out there that I too like was once perpetuating, and I'm sure I still am in some ways. Like,
Right.
it's a work in
Unconsciously.
progress, right?
Totally.
But like, I think if we can work toward wholeness and
Mhm.
this perspective of like, okay, well, the season that I'm at in my life actually matters. My ability to look within, ask myself meaningful questions, and we're talking to coaches, so I know that's you're probably second nature. But and then really intentionally from there, okay, now what do I want to create in my marketing? kind of experience do I want people to have? And quizzes are a part of that, but they're not, the whole ecosystem.
Right. That's such a beautiful metaphor. Thank you for sharing it. What I heard you say was in the beginning, even in your business, you saw such an opportunity to grow your business by niching down into quizzes. And quizzes are and were fantastic, but they're a part of the big picture. And so by having such a narrow focus, it allowed you to easily forget about all of the other things that the quiz funnel might impact or things that might be ignored when you're focusing only on one element. So whether it's quizzes or Instagram reels or having a podcast or anything like that, the point you're making here is to start by looking inward and then look holistically at your entire business and then make decisions about lead gen and your offerings and all of those pieces, but looking at it as a whole rather than seeking fast and slick solutions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So, with that as our jumping off point, I want to encourage our listeners to be in a position where you can take some notes as you listen. But remember, as incredible as a quiz might be in your business, listen to Chanti's advice through this lens of your business as an ecosystem rather than a quiz as simply a strategy. Should we dive in, Chanti?
Yeah. And I'll just throw into that, like, part of the ecosystem is the sun. That's the main source of energy in any ecosystem. In nature, the sun represents 80% of the energy that comes into an ecosystem. In your business, you are the sun. So taking care of yourself, knowing yourself, that's the foundation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What does that look like for you?
Oh, lately it looks like having intermittent social media fasts.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, are you familiar with intermittent fasting?
Yeah.
So you don't
Just
eat
for our
until,
listeners. Yeah. Fill our listeners in case they're not.
yeah, it's actually really funny. When I first started working in the world of writing online, I worked with this company and I wrote so many articles on intermittent fasting. Like, I could just talk about it. I know way too much about it. But basically, your body remains in a fasted state for 12 to 18 hours of the day, and then you have a small window where you're consuming food. And so you might have your last meal at 6 o'clock and then not eat again until 11 in the morning, for
Right.
example.
Mm-hmm.
And all sorts of cool stuff happens in a fasted state. But for social media purposes, for me, I'm really trying to not look at social media at all until noon and then close it down by 6 or 7. And I don't always stick to that,
Mm-hmm.
especially when I want to be distracted by something. Yeah. But having that structure in place has been helping me a lot. And that trickles over into like email and business activities, because I used to be this person who would wake up at 5 and start working, and after my kids went to bed, pull my laptop out again and keep working on my business until 11. And it was incredibly unsustainable. So keeping a tighter container is making a big difference.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think for me, as like the center of the universe here in my own ecosystem, I'm learning more and more how to delegate powerfully. I think part of my Capricorn identity is like any sort of assessment, astrology, human design, like all of the things tell me that I should work to relax.
Yes.
And that's really been true for me, but learning how to delegate powerfully and trust myself enough to hand things over has been an extreme extremely beneficial form of self-care.
Are you a projector in human design? Did we talk about that?
No, I'm a manifesting generator.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always jealous of the manifesting generators. As a projector in the house.
Oh, projector. Yeah.
But yes, delegating, that's huge. And
Yeah, it really
not the
is.
easiest thing in the world, but it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, why don't we dive into quizzes? I want to just start by asking, why do quizzes work so well when it comes to lead gen, especially for coaches?
Yeah, there's multiple reasons, but I think one of the most compelling reasons, especially for coaches, is
Mm-hmm.
that you, of all people, know how powerful questions can be. A question is like a portal into just a world of possibility. And as a coach, you learn to ask great questions, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
see how profound that skill set is in helping people, in helping yourself. And how do you do that at scale? Right? So
Right.
I know it's not the same. Like a question on a quiz cannot be compared and put on the same level as a question in an intimate coaching session, but it's a starting point. It's the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of a conversation with someone on the other side who's engaged, curious, asking that question to themselves, analyzing how they might respond to it, and then giving you that feedback. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
way that we can ask questions at scale. And when we get intentional around it, we can ask questions that are really meaningful for both us as coaches and business owners to better understand our audience, but also for our audience to better understand themselves and where they're at based on
Yeah.
the insights that you can give them.
I had never thought of it that way, but you're right. A quiz is an invitation to be introspective. And it can feel like an exchange of energy because I contemplate and I consider my answers and I share them with you and I actually get my answers reflected back to me, which is another brilliant coaching skill, right? Perception checking and reflecting back. I never looked at quizzes through that lens before.
Yeah, it's so fun, right? And when you look out into, say, you went into a shop and you're looking for something specific, the person working in that shop would probably come up to you and ask you, like, how you doing today? What are you looking for? They'd ask you questions, you'd give them feedback, they'd give you a recommendation. And
Yeah.
now it's a little bit different, of course, in the online space and with coaching. It's not a tangible, like, jar of relish, but right? But same idea. So I think that to me is one of the most compelling reasons, is particularly for coaches. But there's other things too, like just the mere fact that a quiz is interactive by its very nature. And anytime you have a piece of marketing that requires active engagement from the person on the other side, you mitigate that problem of eyes glazing over. I'm thinking about something else. I don't really care about that. You mitigate apathy to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this time we're living in, when we're increasingly distracted and have very short attention spans, that is a big deal.
Yeah.
And then the psychology of knowing more about yourself and where you're at and being able to meet people where they're at, like that will never not be compelling,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
for those who are on a journey of discovery in some context.
Yeah. I hear that. So as I listen to you, I realize that we should take a step back and fill everyone in on like what a quiz is when it comes to list building and lead
Mhm.
generation, what a quiz actually is and how it is essentially works. So could you give us the brief overview of the utility and function of a quiz?
Yeah, definitely. And I brought a few examples from
Okay,
coaches that I've worked with in my program or as clients that I thought could offer some context here.
great.
So I'll use one example. Corey, her name is Corey. She was a student of mine, and she is a anti-racism educator, coach, and wanted to grow her email list. And through growing her email list, you probably know, you as in the listener, that that is a powerful way to reach more people with your message, with your offers, and you don't have to rely on referrals so much.
Mhm.
Dallas has so many episodes on that, so I'm not going to go too deep, but it's a really incredible asset to have. So Corey joined the program with the intention of creating a quiz and didn't really have huge expectations. Like she told me, she's like, I don't know, I wasn't really expecting all that much. But what happened is basically, so she, did some work around what kind of message she wants to put out there, what kind of people she wants to bring in, and came up with the idea of um, let me pull it up here. Her quiz is, which civil rights icons shoes do you walk in? So
Mhm.
that was her idea, super fun. And each of those icons has like specific characteristics, value sets, ways that they've walked in the world that she could then say to the quiz taker, this is the one you have the most in common with.
Yeah,
Whoa, what a way to feel good about yourself and be
right.
encouraged to keep doing this work. So the process of that was, the person, they see this quiz title and they are like, oh yeah, I wonder, I'm curious about that. I'll take 2 minutes out of my day and answer some questions here. And so she then intentionally crafts usually up to 10 questions, sometimes more. And that could be to help understand which result that person should get. It could also just be for her as a business owner, what does she want to ask? What does she want to know
Mhm.
from her audience? So asking questions around that. Um, and then at the end, there's a little form that pops up and it says something along the lines of, congrats, now enter your name and email, and you'll get instant access to your results. So then they fill that out, get the results, and you have a new lead.
Great. So, just like other lead magnets, there's usually an opt-in form. So the way a quiz is built, and my quiz is built on using Try Interact. Is that the tool that you utilize also, Shanti?
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
So Try Interact is a quiz platform, everybody. And unlike other opt-ins where I might just see a landing page with a description of the video series I'm going to get or the PDF I'll download, I go through and answer a series of questions and then I opt in order to receive my results. So I can imagine that the conversion rate for a quiz is naturally higher than that of a lot of, I see that in my own business. Uh,
Mhm.
than that of a lot of other lead magnets because I'm, like you mentioned before, I'm engaged with you. I'm invested in the questions and in the results. So opting in is easier to say yes to. Once I opt in, I get my results, and you, the coach, have a new subscriber on your email list. Great. Thank you
Exactly.
for walking us through that.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit more about the quality or perhaps the intention behind the questions to ask on a quiz? You mentioned it
Mhm.
a little bit more, but do you have any advice for our listeners on how to narrow down the questions that they want to ask?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And this connects to more than just the questions, but I think it's
Mhm.
relevant for the questions as well. But really want to begin with the end in mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to think of a quiz as just like this really fun, easy thing to create and throw up and see what happens. But if you take a step back and you look at, well, what are my goals for this? If I'm going to bring people into my community, into my world, what do I actually want them to do? Like, you can look at what you're selling. You can look at your offers. If you have multiple offers, how can you attract people who might be a fit for all of those offers and make sure they end up in the right place? So I think that you did a really beautiful job with this, Dallas, in your questions. I could tell they were very intentional and they were hyper relevant to the coaches that you would serve.
Mm-hmm.
So you weren't asking, tell me where your business is at revenue wise, and then having options that are like, I'm a multiple 7-figure corporate entity over here. Like, there was none of that. The only possible responses were the ones that aligned with the type of coaches and their level of experience that you directly serve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that makes all the difference. So
Got it.
anyone who starts going through those questions and they're like, oh, none of these answers are actually a fit for me, they're just going to drop off and they're not going to complete the quiz. And that's fine. That's a good thing. You can weed people out that will not be a fit for what you have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
So always keeping the context of what your end goal is in mind. And I wouldn't recommend creating a quiz if you just put your website up yesterday and you've yet to have a single coaching client and you are just getting started. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a beautiful place to be. But you need to know how your potential client would respond based on the different stages that you serve.
Mm-hmm.
And so that requires a little bit of experience, right?
Yeah.
I don't want anyone to use that as an excuse and think I don't know enough yet. Even probably having 5 clients in the past is maybe even enough to know, oh, based on what I've heard from the people I serve, this might be how they respond.
Yeah.
And as a coach, you
Mm-hmm.
can pull questions that you would maybe ask in a one-on-one session.
Yes, exactly.
And ask
Okay,
them
here's what I feel like we're touching on, and I just want to drive it home for our listeners because it's so important. The theme I'm picking up here, Chanti, is quizzes are great for lead gen, but you want to make sure you're set up to attract an aligned audience so that your ecosystem doesn't get off balance, right? So it's not enough to just throw a quiz together because then you can get email subscribers, because random email subscribers does not equal business growth, and it doesn't equal enrolling more people. So having clarity on the offer and basically building the quiz backward from that offer. But the other thing I heard you say was having a clear understanding of your audience, which comes through experience working with your audience so that you can design a quiz that helps people, A, know they belong, or B, feel really clear that they don't, and then self-select out of the process.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like last summer I grew a bunch of tomatoes.
Okay.
And I didn't really know what I was doing. I love tomatoes. I did not know what I was doing. I didn't actually construct proper supports for the tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up planting them way too close together. They didn't have enough support. The plants were like massive and full of fruit. A lot of it like these green fruits that you're like, okay, someday that's going to be a beautiful, juicy tomato. But not if that plant is falling over and dying before it has a chance to even ripen.
Yeah.
And that in your business looks like not having the infrastructure, the foundation, the solid offer, the strong understanding of who you help, before you start pouring on a bunch of beautiful seaweed fertilizer, which
Yes.
is the quiz.
Right. I'm going to just really take this tomato metaphor too far now. I too planted a garden for the first time ever. We planted
Oh,
baby tomatoes, and we had the right supports in place. But where I fell short was I was not thoughtful about, I was only focused on quantity instead of quality. So I never want to see another tomato for as long as I live. We had so many tomatoes. My neighbors would pass the house and avert eye contact because they knew that I would just shove
yeah.
tomatoes in their face. We had way too many tomatoes. So that's okay, great. I'm going to design a quiz and get a bunch of leads, but then they may not be relevant to my business and I may not be I don't know how to cook. I don't know enough tomato recipes to utilize
Yes,
all the tomatoes.
exactly.
All right. So great. Now that everyone has logged off of this episode because we've gone too far with the tomato analogies, I want to know more specifically. So we understand now the utility and structure of a quiz, the essential, the importance of working backwards from your offers and really waiting until you have a confident understanding of your audience. So now I've ticked those boxes. I'm ready to design a quiz. What are some common and maybe some invisible mistakes that coaches often make with their quizzes?
Okay. So one of the biggest ones, and we even did it, maybe we even alluded to it a little bit because we talked about questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? Before we talked about results. And there is a very common overemphasis on the questions being the most important thing. I'm going to write all the questions first, and then I'll move on to the results, and they're kind of like an afterthought.
Uh-huh.
I really recommend creating the results, or at least the framework for the results, before you look at creating any questions. Because it's really easy to things get messy when you've written a bunch of questions and the possible responses to those questions. And then you're like, okay, wait, how do these connect to what the results will be?
Right.
So you'll save yourself a lot of time and struggle if you create the results first. And the bones of that, if you didn't want to create the whole shebang, the bones of that would just be like, okay, well, what are the characteristics present in each different possible result? So that's a big one.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Another thing that's very common, and this is one that I saw in your quiz, Dallas.
Yeah, I've been waiting to hear. So
Not to pick on
get
you,
on
like,
it.
I think it was really, really good. This is one small thing that can make a huge difference, and that is that opt-in form at the end of the quiz
Mm-hmm.
with Interact, and I think with a lot of other quiz hosting softwares, they just have some placeholder copy that's like so not juicy. And I work with Interact actually directly. I'm their chief evangelist. So I'm trying to help them with this, like making the placeholder copy itself better. But right now it says enter your name and email. We will send you fun and infrequent updates when you
I
get to
didn't
the end of the
even,
quiz.
that's what mine says. Please tell me that's not what mine says.
That's what it says.
Okay,
And
got
you
it.
can customize it, but everyone forgets to customize it
Yeah.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's just like an afterthought. It's there, the copy's there, like there's something, right? And you probably still get pretty decent results even with that being the copy. But if you
Yeah.
shift that just a bit, now there's like different, I guess, GDPR compliance things
Mm-hmm.
that like I just want to emphasize. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not giving you advice on how to be GDPR compliant. So let's take that out of the conversation. This is what I do for myself and for clients is in that opt-in form, I'll put something along the lines of, yes, okay, you're so close to discovering, and
So
then fill in the blank with like reminding them why they took the quiz in the first place. Because
yeah.
it's 10 questions later, Maybe they
Right.
left and had a snack and came back to it and forgot what this is
Mhm.
even about. So reminding them why, like what is the core benefit of entering their name and email?
So
And
good.
then beneath that, you've got some space for a bit of a description. So you can build that out even more. You can be like, this is not your average quiz. In these results, you are going to learn boom, boom, boom. This is relevant to your experience, where you're at. And I will also send you a whole bunch of incredible free resources in relation to fill in the blank, however you help them. So you're letting them know that like this is not the first and only communication they're ever going to
Yeah.
receive from you. You want to prime them to like know that they're going to be on your email list now. You are going to reach out to them directly in their inbox even after they read your result that they might get direct access to. So having something in there, and if you were thinking about GDPR stuff or even just like list cleanliness, you could put in brackets like, don't worry, you can unsubscribe anytime.
Yeah.
Just letting them know.
Yeah.
So, and then now name and email, right? So there's a bit of a reminder. They know what the benefit is. There's some additional context around what they're signing up for. And that can make a huge difference in conversions.
Oh, completely. Thank you so much. I feel very selfish for having you on the show because I just got some really fantastic advice. But what I thought when you were sharing that was, okay, take advantage of that opt-in box as though the quiz didn't exist. Like, what would I say on that final box where it
Mm-hmm.
could stand alone and be a strong enough message that someone's going to opt in, regardless of their deep desire to have their results or not. That's so helpful. Ooh, that's such
Yeah.
an easy fix and an easy mistake to make.
Yes. Yes. Totally.
Are there
So
any other?
that's very
Sorry,
common.
go ahead. If you have any other invisible mistakes that you see often made, I'd love to hear another, and then we can shift gears a little bit.
Oh, okay. Here's one more that
Okay.
is really common is this like desire to be clever and original and super fun and to just have the most witty quiz title there is. And that doesn't always work. Sometimes you just got to be clear,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sometimes being clear is a lot more compelling than being clever or fun, or that's the association that we have with online quizzes. We think of BuzzFeed, we think of like entertainment as
Mm-hmm.
the primary goal, but that's not the primary goal if you're not BuzzFeed, right?
Right.
The primary goal is to give people the answers that they need, to meet them where they're at, to get the right people into your ecosystem. And sometimes, like, oh, I have another fun coaching example. So I created a quiz for a company that they're called Journey. I think we talked about them on our episode. They've just rebranded to Lumia, and they are like a life coaching certification program.
Mm-hmm.
And for their quiz, I asked them, what questions do you get asked from people who are thinking about joining the program?
Yeah.
And the number one question is, well, I don't know. Should I even become a life coach? Like, do I have
Right.
what it takes? I don't have it all together. Like, can I even do this? I'm already a therapist. Should I consider this? Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
but that's the core of the question is, well, should I go down this path? So the quiz itself is, should you become a life coach?
Right. Right.
Right? It's not like mind-blowingly
So
fun or
simple.
clever, but that quiz in like the first year had like 80,000 people who took it.
Right. Wow.
So, right? Simply because if you can really meet the conversation that someone's already having in their head,
Mm-hmm.
that's huge. I feel like I keep saying that's huge, but it
It
is.
really is. It really is. I hear what I hear you saying here, and it's so good, is it's so easy to get distracted by the excitement or the bells and whistles or the creative expression that can happen in a quiz. And so we decide on all the wrong things first. Like, what's my theme? Or, I want this to somehow relate to the Billboard top 10. And I get so hooked into
Yeah.
then I design my questions, and the questions might not be the most relevant or important questions because they got to fit in with the Billboard top 10. And then I think about my results, and that just gets even messier. So what I hear you
Yeah.
saying is, like, in the same way that we would in a coaching session, keeping the client's agenda and the client at the forefront, start with that and design the quiz to really serve the client, even if it means that it's not the most clever quiz.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I always say,
Very
like,
helpful.
you can sweep for injecting more humor and personality and pop culture after you
Yeah.
have the foundation established.
Mhm. Mhm. That's really, really helpful. So a lot of our listeners are at the phase in their business where their ecosystem is growing, and they now have a clear commitment to expanding their reach, and a lot of feelings related to the work it takes to build their list, and what am I really in for with that. So
Mhm.
if one of our listeners feels like they understand their audience and their offer enough to build a quiz, how would you recommend, what assignment would you give them today to help them get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, that question of this sounds so meta, of what questions
Uh-huh.
your clients or potential clients ask you the most. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what answer would they be just overjoyed to hear? Sometimes that answer is, well, like, that there's hope,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not alone. Others have walked this path. Maybe you've walked a specific path. And sometimes that's what they want to hear, right? Sometimes what they want to hear is, well, like, let's take your business, for example, Dallas. Like, if a coach who was really struggling and hated sales, and they just want to coach, like, and they're struggling with marketing stuff and the actual, like, business stuff and scaling that, and they found you, and here you are, you're like, actually, sales is a beautiful thing, and it's an extension of coaching, and marketing doesn't have to feel gross. It can feel really good, and there's a method, there's a proven process, and I can teach you
Yeah.
based on where you're at. They would see that and they'd be like, whoa, really? So that's the kind of experience you want to create for people. So as that question relates to your own business, what does that look like? I think that's a great starting point, because you can get into the experience you want to gift to someone
Yeah.
who ultimately takes your quiz. And how do you want them to feel? Like, that's a big
Mm-hmm.
part of the benefit to a quiz, I think, that isn't talked about that much. But because you're asking questions and getting insights into, like, who someone is, what they're struggling with, what they are working toward, there's an intimacy to that. And so, and because they're engaged in the process, by the time they get that result, there's a real opportunity to, like, lift them up and give them hope, and bolster their confidence a bit. Doesn't matter, like, what industry we're talking about. There's room for that. And really, just like, if you can give someone the experience of feeling supported and seen and hopeful and encouraged and inspired, that's so powerful.
Yeah.
So looking at how you want people to feel, what would light them up, and how does that relate to what you actually offer?
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, now how can I pull this into, like, a title that's going to stoke their curiosity?
Yeah.
So that's a good starting point. And then, another thing to keep in mind, if you get into that place of overwhelm which is so easy to do because there's just so much to take care of. Like, if it's just you and you've yet to start delegating and building a team, and or even if you don't have any interest in that and it's just you and you're wearing all these hats, that's a lot. So you have to be mindful of where you're giving your energy and is it worth it? And with the quiz, what I like to remind people of is, if you approach it with intention and you're really clear on who you help and what you offer, then this is an asset that you're creating that you can use for years.
Yeah.
It's not like a one-off, I'll promote this for a few weeks and then I'll create a new lead magnet that feels fresh. Like, for me, when I work with clients and students, I love to ask the question of, what do you want to be known for?
Mm-hmm.
If you were going to write a book, what would be in that book? Now let's pull that over to the quiz and make sure that's included.
Right.
Yeah.
That was such an exciting and clear assignment. I hope everyone will accept the invitation to really explore their answers to those questions. Chanti, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's always so fun for me to see someone talk about the thing they're passionate about, because you just exude it and you have such expertise and such clarity, but also such authenticity and excitement about helping coaches grow their business, right? And using proven tools to do so. So thank you for bringing all of you to the conversation today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, I mean, coaches and quizzes. It's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, it really is. All right. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Be sure to check the show notes because we've included some resources there for you, and we will see you back here next week.